This past week, Z Cam announced a firmware update for their E2 flagship series. And this is a pretty big firmware update, so I'm going to be doing a brief overview of what this means to Z Cam users and prospective buyers of the Z Cam lineup, meaning the E2 S6, F6, and F8 cameras. Now, first up, Z Cam has added ProRes 422 internal recording to all recording modes. And that addresses a workflow issue that I had, or just overall user experience issue that I had with the camera at first. And this seems to be a trend with Z Cam. It seems that they are listening to the community and other YouTubers. For example, in his review of the F6 model, Gerald Undone did point out an issue with the file splitting and recovery. Shortly after, whether it was due to Gerald Undone's video or whatever it may be, or via the community's feedback to Z Cam, they released an update in the previous firmware that did address the file splitting issue. And that is something that I did bring up in my review of the camera, as well as my 5 things to improve the E2 flagship series. Now, if you haven't seen that video, you guys can check it out. It's either up here, one of the links, either way, you guys can check it out. I always get those two mixed up. But basically, this addresses a ton of concerns, and Z Cam is doing an incredible job of updating the firmware and giving us an incredible value with an already value-based cinema camera. So that's the first update that was addressed. Again, ProRes 422 in all recording modes. And next up is something that I'm very, very grateful for, because I want to start using this feature, is that there is improved reliability for SSD recording, and that is the external SSD via the USB-C. Now, up until this point, I haven't done too much recording with the SSDs. I do film primarily to CFast cards. So with this improvement, it makes me much more comfortable and much more trusting that this camera is gonna be able to handle the recording speeds with this USB-C update. Now, I'm not going to jump right into a client project. In fact, I have a shoot tomorrow where I'm going to be filming with the S6. I'm not going to just jump in and test that SSD right off the bat. I'm going to do some tests on some personal projects, maybe some tests for the YouTube channel. Whatever it is, I'm going to be shooting with CFast until I can confirm the reliability of SSD recording. But according to Z Cam, that is an update. And next up is something that Proxy workflow users are going to be very, very happy about, and that is that we now have proxy recording, ProRes proxy recording. So now when you enable ProRes proxy, you are going to record proxy files to a separate file. So let's say you are recording ProRes 422 HQ, and you will enable the proxy. It will record to a separate file. That is huge if you are working in Adobe Premiere and you don't have to create your proxy files anymore. So if you are working on a slower computer, the Z Cam has you covered. So that's one feature that was added, is the proxy recording. Now, if you are working in DaVinci Resolve, you probably don't need to do that. But on top of that, you won't have to be using H.265, which is a more heavily compressed codec, which requires more processing power. So no more H.265. You very well may not even need to use the ProRes proxy, but we'll see. That actually will come in handy very much so with the F8 model and possibly the F6. So a few other issues were fixed, like the banding within the preview and playback. Now, I didn't notice, substantial banding. In fact, I didn't notice any banding. It's news to me, but when viewing your footage or viewing what you're about to film on the playback, there was an issue with banding, which was addressed. And also another welcome addition for all the F6 users, you now have 5K 60 FPS mode. So that's great. I didn't see whether or not, it didn't say whether or not that was ProRes 422, but I believe so. And that is really it. There are a couple of small fixes to the UVC, which is a USB camera bug fixes, and some other bug fixes. So what this does, in a sense, is, like I said earlier, Z Cam just continues to add value and, providing free firmware updates. And I feel like this simply is just a sign of the times that, we are getting a lot more value for our money when it comes to cameras, especially the, I would say especially the more affordable cameras. Even companies like Red are rolling out firmware updates for the Red Komodo. it recently got an update, and you see cameras like the Blackmagic Pocket, Cinema 4K and 6K cameras. Blackmagic releases huge firmware updates for those cameras, as well as their Ursa lineup. I don't think that you have to buy a new camera every year, like, unfortunately, we're made to feel nowadays, but these cameras are being taken care of. You're getting firmware updates on a regular basis. Now, speaking of updating the firmware, I'm going to show you guys really quickly and easily how to update the firmware. And you simply navigate to zcam, z-cam.com, and we go to support. And once you are on support, you'll see that there is a firmware update page. And within the firmware updates page, you'll see that there is an option to upgrade via the Ethernet method. And I'm not going to do that. I'm actually going to be using the CFast method. And simply go down to Z Cam E2 firmware update. And then you'll see E2 S6 for my camera in particular. Let's say that you had the F6, your firmware update would be down below. And you simply confirm 0.98. And we're going to look at the release notes to make sure. And here we see all resolution and frame rate combinations now support ProRes 422 recording, except C8K 2.4:1. And we know that that's the version to download, and we simply download the file, save it, and we're going to save it to the CFast card here. And then we're going to safely eject the CFast card and simply put it in the camera. And we're going to put it in the camera first before we turn it on. And we will insert the CFast card, boot up the camera, and it's a pretty quick boot up. If you are a Red user, you are very familiar with long boot ups, but the Z Cam has very exceptional boot up time. And then upon loading the camera, you will be met you will be met with a confirmation that you want to upgrade your firmware, and we're going to say okay. So we're just going to let it do its thing, let it update. So now the firmware is updated, and there is one unfortunate thing that I have noticed when updating the firmware on the Z Cam, and that's that you have to redo the initial setup. So you have to set your date and time, you have to set the hertz, and in fact, I believe, and I'm going to confirm right now whether or not my custom user settings were reset. So user button, and unfortunately, looks like it was reset. So all of my custom function buttons that I set on the side here were reset when I updated my firmware. So Kinsan, anyone at Z Cam, if you are watching this, please consider changing that, and at least giving us the option to retain our settings, because I did spend quite a bit of time going through and making custom tailoring this camera to my personal use case. So I have to redo all my settings here, and it's not too big of a deal. It's not gonna it's not gonna kill me, but it is something that I do hope you guys address in the future. So now we have our firmware updated, and we are ready to start shooting, and we are going to be shooting in ProRes 422 or above from here on out. There's no more H.265, so that is a huge plus when it comes to the Z Cam. All right, guys, so there you have it. Now you know how to upgrade the firmware on your Z Cam E2 S6, F6, or F8 camera. This, honestly, to me, is one of the most value-based cameras in the market right now, and I'm very thankful that we have a company like Z Cam and a community like the Z Cam user community that gets behind the camera and is helping to push value-based cameras that can perform and punch above its weight class. I mean, this camera is hanging with the big boys. It's filming alongside, really high-end cameras, and it's doing so at the fraction of a cost. So again, thank you to the Z Cam community. Thank you to Z Cam themselves. And this is not me, kissing butt. This is just me simply loving the simple fact that we're getting a lot of value out of this camera, just like we do with the Blackmagic cameras and the like. So that being said, guys, if you enjoyed this video and you found it informative and you learned something from it, please give it the thumbs up and share it on social media. I'd also like to invite you to join the Driven Films Discord community. You can find a link to the Discord in the description below, and I'd love to chat with you guys on there. So hope to see you there. Also, if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Until next time, take care.